A surprising news story is changing the international trade landscape in Canada. It seems the country is considering removing its 100% tariff barrier on electric vehicles coming from China. This decision, which until now had caused diplomatic tensions with Beijing, has also plunged the Canadian agricultural industry into an unprecedented crisis. In an unexpected turn, Prime Minister Mark Carney has shown signs of flexibility, and Foreign Minister Melanie Joly has publicly acknowledged that the policy is being reviewed. For millions of people in the United States, this Canadian situation may seem distant, but it actually highlights the growing cracks in the Western strategy based on aggressive tariffs and raises a troubling question. If Canada backs down, will the United States be next to face similar pressures? This trade dispute began in October 2024, when Canada imposed a 100% tariff on electric cars manufactured in China. The measure, which has been in place since the Trudeau era, was justified as an urgent protection for the national automotive industry, which struggles to remain competitive amid the global rise of electric vehicles. Some analysts argue that this decision was driven more by fear than by a clear strategy. China's advance in this sector was explained not only by innovation, but also by strong state subsidies that distorted competition in the global market. However, as many experts point out, trade wars are rarely one-sided, and this case was no exception. Within a few months, Beijing responded with severe tariffs on Canadian agricultural exports, particularly affecting the canola sector, which is vital for the prairie provinces. A tariff close to 76% practically closed the Chinese market, causing a dramatic drop in canola futures and leaving thousands of farmers with unsold products and growing debts. What began as a barrier to protect car manufacturers quickly turned into an economic conflict affecting two key sectors. While Ottawa tried to show firmness, cracks began to appear. Organized and desperate farmers raised their demands to the government, demanding concrete solutions and warning that they could not endure another season without access to their main buyer. At the same time, the Canadian automotive industry, which was supposedly to benefit from this policy, began to show signs of weakness. According to the latest data, electric vehicle sales in Canada fell by 40% compared to the previous year, a clear sign that the strategy was not yielding results. Some observers warn that this explosive combination of agricultural unrest and industrial problems is driving the Canadian government to a crucial crossroads: maintain a rigid stance at all costs, or pragmatically adapt to global market realities. Ottawa's next decision could set a precedent not only for Canada but also for key allies like the United States, where trade tensions with China are also reaching critical levels. We are facing a possible structural change in tariff policy or a new episode of improvisation with unpredictable consequences. As Ottawa slowly softens its stance, internal pressure continues to grow from multiple fronts, showing how complex it is to maintain a trade policy that seeks to protect one industry at the expense of sacrificing another. At the heart of the conflict is the canola industry, valued at over 43 billion Canadian dollars and generating more than 200,000 jobs in the country. For farmers in Saskatchewan and the prairie provinces, this is not a political game but a matter of immediate economic survival. Many claim their livelihoods have been used as bargaining chips to protect car manufacturers in Ontario, causing an increasingly deep political and territorial fracture within the country. Various trade experts point out that this case harshly reflects one of the greatest dilemmas of modern tariff policy. Trying to benefit one productive sector often causes severe collateral damage to another. As farmers intensified their demands with meetings, public letters, and protests, the first sign of openness arose unexpectedly. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe traveled to Beijing on an economic mission initially criticized but later explicitly supported by Prime Minister Carney, who suggested Moe's approach could open strategic doors. This public backing was interpreted by many as a clear sign that the federal government was beginning to recalibrate its strategy. Shortly after, Foreign Minister Melanie Joly confirmed what was already an open secret. The official review of tariff policy was underway. Agriculture Minister Heath MacDonald was even more explicit, indicating that the tax itself was being reconsidered, opening for the first time the possibility of a total or partial reversal of the measure. This change represented a radical shift in the government's narrative. From a firm and defensive speech, Ottawa moved to adopt a more flexible stance, willing to make adjustments and concessions with a pragmatic focus on the economy. While the agricultural front gained prominence, the automotive industry faced its own challenges. The unforeseen consequences of the tariff were severely affecting the sector it was meant to protect. Electric vehicle sales plummeted, falling from a solid 18% of total new registrations to a modest 8.6% in just 1 year. The main reason was price increases and the elimination of incentives at both federal and provincial levels. In May, British Columbia completely canceled its subsidy program, while Quebec barely managed to maintain its own after strong public backlash. For consumers, the choice became clear. Without affordable options and with premium models out of incentive reach, many abandoned the idea of purchasing an electric vehicle. Some experts suggest that Chinese cars, known for accessible technology and competitive prices, could have filled this gap, but the tariff excluded them from the market. Thus, the policy designed to promote national electrification ended up slowing the country's ecological progress, generating increasingly severe criticism about its effectiveness and coherence. The irony could not be greater. A measure intended to strengthen the national electric vehicle industry ended up paralyzing its development and forcing the Canadian government to postpone its environmental goals. By mid-2025, Ottawa suspended its zero-emission vehicle sales mandate for 2026, a clear sign that tariff policy was clashing with market reality. Simultaneously, emergency funds were approved to support domestic manufacturers in overcoming the impact, confirming that the negative effects were already inevitable. Some critics argue that this setback not only affects the fight against climate change, but also highlights how rushed political decisions can compromise long-term objectives. Meanwhile, prairie farmers continued to be the most affected by China's counterattack. Canola, the symbol of this devastation, saw its exports collapse, unsold inventories pile up, and the fear of massive indebtedness spread through rural communities. In 2024, China accounted for nearly 5 billion Canadian dollars in canola purchases, a figure impossible to replace in the short term. Although the agriculture minister promised financial support, producers rejected subsidies and demanded the restoration of normal trade with their main buyer. As one Alberta farmer expressed, "We don't want temporary help. We want the government to stop sabotaging us." This sentiment resonated throughout the western part of the country, where provincial governments began to pressure Ottawa with an increasingly unified voice. In this scenario, the national debate intensified. Should Canada maintain its rigid stance to protect manufacturers, or was it time to adapt to a more competitive and changing global environment? Some analysts warn that keeping the 100% tariff could deepen economic stagnation and social discontent, especially if other nations like the United States begin to ease their own policies toward Chinese imports. Others fear that yielding to external pressure could send a signal of weakness at a crucial moment for Canadian industrial autonomy. Faced with this dilemma, possible intermediate solutions emerge. One alternative would be to partially remove the tariff, allowing certain models of Chinese vehicles to enter while maintaining barriers to protect key market segments. Another option would be to diversify imports through agreements with Japan, South Korea, and the European Union, reducing dependence on China without losing access to affordable vehicles. There is also consideration of using tariff reduction as a bargaining chip, demanding concrete investments from Chinese manufacturers in exchange, such as building plants on Canadian soil. According to various experts, this tactic could turn a trade crisis into an opportunity to reindustrialize the country, although the political risk is considerable. Yielding to this pressure could provoke discontent in provinces with a strong automotive industry and provide ammunition to those who accuse the government of acting without planning or long-term vision. However, the potential benefits, such as revitalizing agricultural trade, recovering the vehicle market, and accessing affordable technology, are equally relevant. Can Ottawa turn this conflict into a new paradigm of industrial policy? Pressure is mounting from multiple fronts. struggling agricultural producers, consumers who cannot access affordable electric cars, paralyzed manufacturers, and growing geopolitical tensions. The Canadian government is at a crucial moment. This is not just about a 100% tariff on electric cars made in China. What is at stake is the country's overall economic and strategic credibility. At this juncture, many specialists insist that Ottawa cannot simply resist. It must rethink its strategy with a clear, coherent, and effective vision. Several trade policy analysts suggest that the key lies in linking any tariff reduction to concrete and measurable outcomes. For example, demanding real investment commitments from Chinese brands in plants within Canadian territory, which would allow for local job creation and strengthen the national value chain. In this way, the government would not be yielding to pressure, but rather taking advantage of the conflict to gain long-term industrial benefits. Some even propose conditioning the tariff removal on a schedule of environmental and technological commitments, ensuring that new investments are not only economic but also sustainable. However, the situation is more complex than it seems. Relaxing tariffs could provoke strong backlash in provinces more tied to the traditional automotive industry, such as Ontario, where unions and manufacturers fear a flood of competition that could destroy jobs and close factories. Moreover, many politicians believe that backtracking would send a signal of weakness not only to China but also to voters who see tariffs as a defense of economic sovereignty. Faced with this dilemma, Ottawa's next steps could redefine the Canadian economic model. Should it continue to bet on rigid protectionism, which has already shown its limitations, or design a hybrid policy that combines strategic defense with selective openness and modernization? Beyond Canada, this decision has global repercussions. In the United States, where the administration maintains a strict stance toward Chinese cars, many are watching closely what happens to the north. If Canada manages to negotiate investments, reactivate its agricultural trade, and energize its automotive market without losing local jobs, this could pressure Washington to reassess its own strategy. Some analysts warn that a partial opening in Canada could turn the country into a gateway for Chinese cars into the North American market through existing agreements such as the USMCA. If this scenario materializes, the United States would be forced to react, reigniting the internal debate over the real costs of tariff policies. Ultimately, the real challenge is not limited to canola or cars, but how democracies face the challenges of an increasingly aggressive and multipolar international trade environment. Tariffs may offer temporary relief, but also create dangerous distortions if not accompanied by solid industrial strategies, constant investments, and a clear vision of the future. For citizens, both in Canada and the United States, the consequences are already tangible. More expensive food, fewer sustainable transportation options, jobs at risk, and a growing sense that economic policy improvises rather than plans. So, a fundamental question arises. What should Canada do at this crucial moment? Remove the tariff to protect its farmers and consumers, or maintain a firm stance in defense of its automotive industry? Is it possible to safeguard both agricultural and manufacturing interests simultaneously? And what implications would this have for U.S. trade policy, caught in its own web of tariffs, sanctions, and global disputes? Share your opinion in the comments. The time has come to decide whether to change course or resist until the end.